that were making, or commissions rather, that were making decisions in our lives. So from that, number one, there was an electoral strategy that was created. From that came all of those progressive representatives that, some of which, like Chris, are still serving in City Hall, who we knew we could count on as allies, and who, more importantly, we knew would be held accountable by the community because we had put them there in the first place. From that came a response called the People's Plan, which was a broad, very broad document that allowed us to come to the planning department and say, these are the land use priorities that we, the community, have come up with. And you, planning department, need to take this document and turn it into the law of the land. From that also came a massive response in terms of leadership development from the community, where people, literally by the hundreds, were becoming informed about what was happening at the planning department, were becoming informed about how city government worked, and were actually showing up at hearings. We had Latino families, we had SRO tenants, by the hundreds, who were showing up and making their voices heard directly. And this is a dynamic that persists to this day. It got to the point where when we, as a community, knew that the response wasn't sufficient, we were able to bring the department to come to the Mission District. We had a community meeting where we called the head of the planning department to come to the Mission District, and 500 people filled up Horace Mann Middle School and held the department accountable to the community. It was those sorts of dynamics where we weren't just asking our representatives to speak for us, but where we as a community felt empowered enough to say, this is us, this is who we are, and we have these demands, and we have enough power and enough knowledge in our community to hold you accountable. From these beginnings, from these plans that we had, and still have, we were able to win some major victories. We were able to go to the planning department and ask them and demand that a rezoning be done, not just in the Mission District, but ultimately throughout the eastern neighborhoods of San Francisco, which after an 8-year period has resulted in a new zoning plan for San Francisco that eventually ended up protecting a lot of the industrial land that was being threatened by runaway market rate development. It resulted in all of those commissions that previously had been solely appointed by the mayor, now being not just appointed by the mayor, but also by the Board of Supervisors, and thereby being more representative of who the community is and being more accountable to the community. It also resulted in a long line of activists who came out of that movement who are now spread throughout San Francisco. We have folks who are working in City Hall and who continue to serve us, like Chris. We have folks on different commissions. We have SRO leaders in hotels right now who work on the daily to make sure that the folks that live around them aren't being abused by SRO tenants. We had the creation of SRO collaboratives that are now working throughout all of the eastern neighborhoods in San Francisco to make sure that the lives of poor folks who live in market rate SRO hotels are better than they were 10 years ago. Beyond that, we actually have a vision of a movement that's more than just a vision. We have an example of a movement that became effective, where people didn't just look to elected leadership, but actually took power into their own hands as a community. And that lives on today. And everybody who's here is really here because of the successes that we've had. It wasn't something that we can look back as a historical moment. All of those dynamics that were there before, all of the desire by the powers that be to change San Francisco into something that's cleaner and whiter and brighter, that's still there. We know that those forces are still at play. But what we have now, which we didn't have before, is an organized movement that has experience, that has leadership, and that has a plan and a vision of how things should be, but also how they have been as a result of the changes that the community put in place and made happen beginning 10 years ago. So, thank you everybody for